They'll be looking for you.
Resident Evil. It's a household name, and Capcom invented survival horror back in 1996. Okay, there were a couple of games before it, but Capcom really took the essence of what survival horror was and really pushed it forward. They kept doing this again and again, redefining that genre and retelling us what it means to be a survival horror game. And now, they've done it again. Capcom always pushed the boat out and wasn't afraid of testing new ideas, and sticking to their guns in a lot of ways too. Many thought tank controls were awful, but most people that played the original were fine with this control scheme, sticking around for years to come as well. The 2002 remake of the first game included an option for 3D control, which was nice, but I still use tank. I guess it's just what you're used to. After Resident Evil 3, the series took a major turn with the release of Resident Evil 4, featuring Leon Kennedy. Gone were the fixed cameras, and now it all turned to a third-person over-the-shoulder style. This style in itself spawned so many games, and soon enough, everyone was adopting the Resi 4 camera. Gears of War, I'm looking at you.
This is what was great about Capcom. They always set the bar when it comes to horror, style, and every character you meet is memorable. Robert Kendo comes to mind with his bitter demise in Resident Evil 2. Such a small scene, but to this day, it still stands out as an iconic moment.
After 4 came Resident Evil 5 and 6, and this is where many thought the series took a downward turn. It was at the time when online and co-op gaming was a big deal. Playing with your friends and fighting together was a pretty awesome concept, and to have a Resident Evil do that was amazing. But it had a few problems. Having a buddy with you all the time instantly took away from the horror. Chris Redfield was now a boulder-punching badass, and both characters were armed to the teeth.
Okay, so it had its moments, and for the most part Resident Evil 5 was a pretty good action game. 6 followed suit and kept the action but ramped it up to 11. But the problem with Resident Evil 6 was it tried to take so many different styles of gameplay and slap them all together over many chapters, and it ended up being a massive mess. Even long-term fans of the series, such as myself, were left bewildered at what is this? When I first saw the trailer for Resident Evil 7, I instantly thought it was for the new Outlast game. Indie horror had really come into the spotlight by now, and were churning out gripping horror experiences left and right. Outlast was a big name in this area, so I naturally assumed this was their next entry. That was until the title appeared at the end. It was Resident Evil 7, and I literally remember myself going, what the actual fuck?
Amazed that a new Resi on the way, but at the same time horrified. Capcom, the former innovators of the genre, had basically followed suit and decided to go mainstream and just copy current trends of the time. I was definitely surprised, as were a lot of others. What would this new game entail? How does it all fit? Who are the characters?
So many questions, and later they were answered, but the more I heard, the less interested I became. I can live with the first-person camera, I suppose. It does heighten the fear element, but I still think horror works very well in third person, if done correctly. If it didn't, then all horror movies would suck, right? I mean, that's the whole point of them. I mean, first-person horror movie? Everyone would lose their shit over that.
There's something about the fixed cinematic camera that does work very well. The directors can make you look wherever they want you to and set up some pretty intense scares. The liquor crashing through the interrogation room window in Resident Evil 2 was a great example of this, as well as many other moments in the other Resident Evil games. But okay, for 7 they were going first person. But then it was learned they were going first person, and it was going to be supported on the new PSVR that was on the horizon.
In addition to the PS4 console experience, the full Resident Evil 7 will be playable from beginning to end with PlayStation VR.
Alarm bells started to ring, and it immediately felt like Capcom had forgone their usual innovative style to support a gimmick peripheral. Don't get me wrong, I think VR is great, but I still think it's in its infancy, and with a lot of people suffering from intense motion sickness, it's not suitable for everyone.
But despite all this, the camera, the distinct likeness to most other horror games, I was still intrigued. I bought it day one, avoiding some of the more ridiculous merchandise, like a 4D candle. Really? Okay. Playing Resident Evil 7 is like playing something that resembles Outlast and features troops of everything else going. Do you get chased by something? Yes. Are there jump scares? Yes. Does it give you a moment where you lose all your gear and are rendered helpless? Yes. Do enemies show up when you don't have a gun? Yes.
There are a lot of times throughout where you forget you are playing a Resident Evil game, but in fact you are really enjoying the experience you are having. I feared that it would get old as you played it. Being chased over and over again gets old fast. Fortunately, it changes up its playstyle constantly, never giving you a moment to say, "Oh, here we go again, I'm being chased by an unstoppable enemy whilst trying to find a key." Outlast is purely based on that concept, and it only happens in Resident Evil 7 about 3 or 4 times in total. The game is so much more than that, and when the molded show up, it really starts to feel and play more like a Resident Evil game.
Item management still plays a big part, although it's more forgiving with item boxes and save points. Seriously, there are so many safe rooms that it never feels like you're more than a few feet away from one at any time. However, after certain sections, you are always glad to see one. Also, Resident Evil 7 features an autosave that often saves you right before something really bad. So if you die, as you forgot to bring the grenade launcher with you, I totally didn't do that, the autosave puts you back right before the boss. So you have an opportunity to go in and rejig your inventory without having to play large chunks of the game again.
When you finish the game, you unlock Madhouse difficulty. You now use a tape recorder to save, replacing the traditional Resi typewriter. And in Madhouse difficulty, there's a limited amount of tapes that you have to find to save the game, making it a lot more strategic.
Unlike the action-packed 5 and 6, the weapons in 7 are very limited, and Ethan is a terrible wielder of these weapons. His aim isn't steady at all, and you will be struggling to hit your targets, especially when a lot of the time you are caught off guard by an enemy's sudden appearance. Add to that, for the most part, ammo is scarce. You will often find yourself facing an enemy with only 3 rounds in a handgun. Let me tell you, it certainly activates the run mode in your brain very quickly.
Along the journey, there are some incredible set pieces and really jaw-dropping moments, but none of it ever refers to anything familiar in the Resident Evil world. No mention of Umbrella, not even a note or hint of any of the classic characters. And Ethan is perhaps the weakest character in the entire history of Resident Evil. His dialogue rarely amounts to more than the occasional "fuck you, fuck you, fuck, oh, don't do that, let her go." And he never says anything of any importance. The real stars here are the supporting cast, and they do a good job, but the story is awful. It's genuinely a rubbish plot, and it's one that you've heard 1,000 times, and now they've brought it into a Resident Evil game.
Not wanting to spoil anything here, but I think Resident Evil 7's biggest downfall was that it feels like a spin-off that has nothing to do with the original franchise, but bears a numbered name. It feels as foreign as Resident Evil Dead Aim, a totally different beast, so why did they add a number to it?
Now, I'm not kidding when I say the story is so utterly weak, it barely makes much sense, and it's filled with plot holes. It's pretty much lifted directly from Silent Hill 2 with the whole, "oh, I got sent a video from my wife that was supposedly dead and now she's not, but there we go." And parts of it feel a lot like Fear. You remember that series? And I guess it should, because yes, it was written by the same person. Also, there are some stupid plot holes, like Ethan gets his hand cut off with a chainsaw and then it's crudely stapled back on and he has full use of it? No questions asked here. Am I the only one that thought, what the fuck? Apparently there's a note somewhere that gives you some sort of explanation, but I never found it, so it wasn't really obvious. The cop, when he meets you at the window, doesn't notice the stab wounds in Ethan's face, nor his hand. And why doesn't Ethan use one of these many frickin' phones to just call in the cavalry? 911, idiot, dial it. Also, what happened to Lucas? Okay, I'm trying to stay cryptic here, as I genuinely don't want to spoil anything for anyone that is yet to experience it. But trust me, you won't be playing this for the story at all. You will, however, be having too much fun getting the crap scared out of you to really care about how awful the story is. The atmosphere is tight and the horror vibes are strong, but the repeated use of the same jump scares is a real downer when going through again. Once completed, the horror is totally gone from Resident Evil 7, so for that, it's a one-trick pony. The Bakers are so easy to dance around once you've figured them out, and you can get through the main campaign without trying too hard in just under 2 hours when you know what you're doing. Don't worry though, your first playthrough will be around 10 because you really won't know what to expect, and you'll most likely be standing frozen in a corridor, fearing every sound you hear. What was that? What does that creak mean? Was that a footstep? Is it behind me? Subsequent playthroughs will have you hunting for all the special items you can pick up, and completing it in under 4 hours will unlock more bonus items and weapons to use. It's a journey of horrific enjoyment, but at the same time you also feel quite sad that the Resident Evil you really loved growing up is dead and gone. For its brilliant return to horror, Resident Evil 7 has done very well. It's changed just enough to be different, but perhaps too different to be classed as a good Resident Evil game. Make no mistakes about it though, this is horror through and through, and it'll scare the crap out of you. But as for being reminiscent of the original Resident Evil, I can't really say it's achieved that. This is very much a Resident Evil for a new audience. You can come into this and play it without having any prior knowledge. It has hints here and there of the originals, but don't go expecting a fan service because it just isn't there. This is new, it's scary, and it's not Resident Evil. But it's still amazing. Giving this a GameGazm 8.
So there you have it, Resident Evil 7. Is it the gem we all wanted, or is it a strange anomaly? Will it ever return to fixed camera, or is that something best left in the past? Only time will tell.